Hi guys, Erik Norlander here again. We have the UNO Synth here at Knobcon in Chicago. We also have the new UNO Synth Editor for both Mac PC and iOS going. We should talk a little bit about the editor because the editor is the new thing. So, as you guys know, the UNO Synth is a real analog synthesizer. So it's not a soft synth, not a VI. It's not like controlling, DSP in the computer. It's a standalone hardware synth. There are 20 synthesis parameters available from the front panel, but then there are additional synth parameters that you can access via MIDI continuous controllers. So if you have a keyboard controller sending from your computer, whatever, you can access all kinds of additional parameters. So to make that easier, we've made this beautiful editor, and in addition to putting all 20 of the synth parameters up on the screen at once, where you can just immediately see everything that's going on, you can also get to the additional parameters that I talked about rather than having to send MIDI CC messages. The editor is going to do that for you. So, for example, if you want to do pulse width modulation using the LFO or using the envelope, you can do that from dedicated controls in the editor. You can also set the amounts, the depths of the performance buttons, the dive, scoop, vibrato, wah, and tremolo. They have dedicated controls on the panel and lots of things like that. And perhaps the coolest thing about the editor is it's a standalone application, but it's also a plugin. So if you're using Digital Performer, Pro Tools, Logic, whatever, you can open up the editor in your DAW session, make all of your edits as if this was a virtual instrument, and those edits will be saved with the session, just like if you were doing it in Syntronic or another virtual instrument, except here you have a real analog synthesizer that's going to sync with the plugin. And then when you open up your session again, all of your settings for that song will magically reappear and sync with the hardware. And of course it's bi-directional, so, sorry I'm doing this upside down, but if I turn the cutoff frequency knob, you'll see it turning here on the editor at the same time. So you can actually have one hand on the mouse, or in iOS on the screen itself, and another hand on the hardware, and be adjusting both of them simultaneously, and the editor and the hardware will stay in sync. So let's do a little editing here, if we can hear over the noise of the show. Like I said, the editor and the hardware will stay in sync with each other. So if we're changing something as simple as the cutoff frequency, you'll see it here on the editor. And similarly, if I adjust it here on the editor, I'm actually changing the hardware right now. And then of course, the cutoff parameter will be where I left it. Okay, so let's change our envelope, for example. So here I can bring the release down. Here's our sustain, and just do a quick decay. Another cool thing about the editor is the envelopes on the front panel, we limited it to just 2 stages for the filter envelope and 2 stages for the amp envelope. So we give you filter, attack, and decay, which are the most used parameters for a filter envelope, in our opinion, and then attack and release for the amp envelope. However, in the synth itself, they are complete 4-stage ADSRs. So with the editor, we actually give you all 4 stages. So you have attack, decay, sustain, release for the filter, for the amp, and then attack, decay, sustain, release for the filter as well. And then there's also a graphical representation. So if I change the filter decay here, you'll actually see the shape of it change in the editor graphically to show you what I'm doing. So, the same thing with the attack. I'm talking over a laser beam battle. I think the resistance is winning. All right, so I mentioned being able to control pulse width modulation from the filter envelope or from the LFO. We can also control the shape of the oscillators. I told you guys in Berlin, of course, that they're continuous wave shape oscillators, so you can go from triangle to saw to square and then into pulse width modulation. Well, we can actually do that. We can actually set the LFO to modulate the shape of the oscillator with this control here. And this is the filter envelope. We'll actually sweep the shape of the oscillator, or we can have the LFO modulate the shape of the oscillator. And then when we're on the square wave, we can do the same thing with pulse width modulation. So we can go from 50% pulse all the way to 90-something% pulse. That's a pretty cool update to the synth. You know, the ethos behind the synth was to create the analog synth for everyone. So we wanted to do something that was very simple and clear, but still as powerful as possible. So that's the ultimate balance, right? Like, it wasn't a question of what features to include. It was a question of what features do we leave out, to keep it simple enough and compact enough. Well, now with the editor, we're able to reach a little bit further, and we're not forcing you to actually use MIDI CCs to do deeper editing. You can just plug in the editor, it'll sync with the synth, and then you have additional control. So that's the new thing, and my haircut.